The envelope trembled in her hands as she stood alone on the courthouse steps, the cold morning wind cutting through her thin coat. Inside were the divorce papers, signed, sealed, and ready to end a marriage that had once felt like a miracle. No one around her noticed the silent tears sliding down her cheeks, or the quiet strength gathering inside her chest. They saw only a tired woman walking away from a broken life. But what they didn't know was this. The moment she signed her name, everything was about to change, and the world was about to discover who she really was. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and hidden strength, take a moment right now to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that even in our darkest moments, light is waiting. Her name was Grace Whitmore, and for 8 long years she had lived in the quiet shadow of her husband, Andrew Whitmore. Their home in a peaceful Ohio suburb looked perfect from the outside, white fence, trimmed lawn, warm lights glowing through the windows at night. But inside those walls, Grace slowly disappeared. Andrew was not cruel in obvious ways. He didn't shout. He didn't hit. He simply dismissed her, her ideas, her dreams, her voice, until she learned to stay silent. He worked in finance, wore expensive suits, and attended high-profile business dinners. Grace, once a bright and ambitious young woman, became the one who cooked, cleaned, and waited. Over time, Andrew began to treat her less like a partner and more like furniture, present, useful, but easily ignored. When she spoke about wanting to return to school or start her own business, he would smile politely and change the subject, as if her dreams were childish fantasies. The final blow came when Andrew decided to sell the small bakery Grace had quietly built from her grandmother's recipes. It had started as a weekend hobby, then turned into a modest online business. For the first time in years, Grace felt alive, but Andrew saw it as a distraction. Without asking her, he signed papers to sell the brand, the recipes, even the name. He told her it was for their financial stability, but she knew the truth. He didn't believe she was capable of building anything meaningful. That night, something inside Grace broke. She realized that staying meant slowly fading into nothing. Leaving meant fear, uncertainty, and loneliness, but also freedom. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal meetings, restless nights, and silent tears. Grace moved into a small rented apartment in a worn-down part of town, with creaky floors and leaky faucets. She had little money, no job, and no clear plan. But for the first time in years, she could breathe. She spent her days walking through local markets, observing people, tasting foods, and remembering her grandmother's gentle hands guiding hers as they kneaded dough. Those memories gave her courage. With borrowed money and second-hand equipment, she began baking again in her tiny kitchen, waking before dawn to prepare pastries and bread. She sold them at a nearby farmer's market, standing behind a simple folding table with a handwritten sign that read, "Grace's Oven, baked with heart." At first, business was slow. Some days she sold almost nothing. Other days she sold out in an hour. She listened carefully to customers, learned what they loved, and perfected her recipes. Slowly, her reputation spread. People came from neighboring towns just to buy her cinnamon rolls and honey-glazed bread. Her hands were often burned, her back ached, and exhaustion followed her everywhere. But so did a quiet joy she hadn't felt in years. Each sale felt like a small victory, proof that she was more than what Andrew had believed. Meanwhile, Andrew's life began to unravel in subtle but steady ways. The company he worked for faced financial trouble, and his once stable income became uncertain. He attended fewer glamorous events and spent more nights alone in their now empty house. Occasionally, he checked Grace's social media, expecting to see signs of struggle. Instead, he saw photos of smiling customers, long lines at the market, and articles praising a local baking sensation. At first, he dismissed it as a temporary phase. But when he recognized her brand name being mentioned in regional food blogs, something shifted. For the first time, doubt crept into his confidence. Grace's big break came when a popular food influencer stumbled across her stall and posted a glowing review. Orders flooded in overnight. Local cafes asked to stock her pastries. A small commercial kitchen offered her a partnership. Within months, Grace employed 3 women from her neighborhood, all struggling mothers looking for a second chance. She paid them fairly, trained them patiently, and built a workplace rooted in respect. Her bakery became a symbol of resilience, and her story inspired countless others who felt trapped or unseen. One rainy afternoon, Grace received an email inviting her to pitch her business to a national investment group in New York. The opportunity was everything she had once dreamed of, and everything she had been told she couldn't achieve. She nearly deleted the message, fear tightening in her chest. But then she remembered the woman she had been on those courthouse steps, trembling, broken, and alone. She clicked reply and accepted. The presentation day arrived, and Grace stood in a sleek conference room overlooking the city skyline, her hands steady, her voice calm. She spoke about her journey, her vision, and her commitment to community. She didn't exaggerate, she didn't hide her struggles, she told the truth. By the end, the room was silent. Then applause filled the air. Within weeks, her bakery secured the funding to expand across several states. The news spread quickly, and eventually reached Andrew. He saw her face on a business magazine cover, her name praised for innovation and heart. The woman he had once dismissed now stood as a powerful entrepreneur. Shame and regret settled heavily in his chest. He tried to contact her, but Grace chose not to respond, not out of anger, but because she had finally learned the value of her peace. As Grace's success grew, so did her impact. She launched training programs for single parents, donated food to shelters, and funded scholarships for young women pursuing culinary arts. Every achievement felt like honoring her grandmother's legacy and healing her own wounded spirit. Yet, despite the recognition, Grace remained humble. She still arrived early at the bakery, greeting employees by name, listening to their stories, and reminding them that their worth extended far beyond their circumstances. Years later, Grace returned to that same courthouse, not for sorrow, but for gratitude. Standing on the steps, she closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, remembering the fear she once carried. That moment of heartbreak had led her to rediscover her strength. The divorce papers that once symbolized loss had become the doorway to her true life. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of your own hidden strength or gave you hope for a new beginning, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe for more stories that uplift and inspire. And before the ending, we have a special request for you. Comment below with the words, "I choose hope," if you believe that no ending is ever truly the end, but the start of something greater. Grace's journey reminds us that sometimes the world only sees our broken moments, not our becoming. But within each of us lies a quiet resilience waiting to rise. When we choose courage over comfort, faith over fear, and purpose over pain, we step into the lives we were always meant to live. And in that transformation, we don't just change our own story, we inspire countless others to believe in theirs.